All right, time for a little Elder Scrolls Online. Wait a minute. Oh no, not this again. Welcome back, everybody. This is the Lost Boy, and thanks for watching. If you enjoy this video, perhaps consider liking and subscribing, and remember to hit that notification bell if you want to see new videos when they come out. So here I am again, with a bit of stick drift happening on my Xbox One controller. I actually had the same problem before with the same controller. At the time, I took it apart, cleaned it up, put it back together, and it seemed to work fine. For a while, and then after some time, the problem came back. So here we are, we're going to do a permanent fix today. First thing is, we have to take it apart. For this, you want a little pry tool. And probably where I'm starting here is not the best place to start. Maybe you want to try flipping it around and trying a different spot like this one here. That definitely seems like a better place to start. These will be harder to take off if you haven't done it before. It'll be a little difficult to take it off without breaking any of the clips, but if you're careful, you should be able to do it. And after the first time you do it, it'll be a lot easier. As you can see, these ones are popping off pretty easily for me. At this point, there's 5 screws that need to be removed. And you take the housing apart and remove the internals. Now, at this point, there's actually a little bit more disassembly that should happen. And as you'll see, I don't do that right now, which is going to come back to haunt me a little bit later, but we'll come back to that. So questionably moving straight on to desoldering here. So I'm just heating up the solder joints, and I'm using a little solder sucking tool to remove what's there. One theme in this video is going to be sometimes how soldering just doesn't really want to cooperate. A couple of factors are the equipment you're using and your level of experience, but also it seems like sometimes from the factory, certain components have like a higher temperature melt solder, and it can be difficult. As you can see here, I'm having trouble wetting the solder joins. Whenever you have that problem, the solution is to add some of your own solder. I probably should have tried that already by this point. So if you add some of your own solder, it actually becomes easier to remove the solder that's there already. Now, removing surface mount things like this can be difficult sometimes. There are different methods to remove all the solder to loosen everything up. In this case, I'm using something called Chip Quick. I'm having some trouble removing the thumbstick, so what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit of Chip Quick to each point, which is a low temperature melting solder, which allows you to heat the solder and keep it molten for a longer time, which then allows you to remove the component while the solder is still hot and molten. So at this point, I've added Chip Quick to all of the points, and I'm just quickly going around heating each point, while at the same time my hand on the bottom of the board is pulling at that component. So I'm pulling this entire time, and I'm wondering why? Why isn't this coming apart? Why is it so difficult? And we'll see in a minute here how not fully disassembling this previously to desoldering was the mistake that caused me a lot of trouble. By this point, I'm almost desperate, so I ask for my helping hand. And I guess that's all it needed to finish it off. The next thing is to go around to each point and remove all of the solder that's sitting there. Each pad should be clean. Now, flipping the controller over, you can see where I've removed the thumbstick, there's still a little piece of the component. When I pulled the thumbstick away, it actually broke off this piece. This piece was attached to the thumbstick, and it stayed on the board when I removed the rest of the board, which could have caused damage. Luckily, it didn't cause damage. It's actually the button that presses down when you click down on the thumbstick. It's off to the side, and it is a part of the thumbstick. So I removed that off camera just in the interest of time. However, this is something that would have been obvious had I taken it apart all the way in the first place. Here I am removing the last two screws to disconnect these two PCBs to get better access. As you could see with the component that was sort of underneath the hole, it wouldn't even be possible to solder in the new piece before further disassembling the two PCBs. Again, here's another chunk where I sort of cut out a bit of video. I had a really hard time getting this flush. Basically, the key here is make sure all your pins are straight and make sure all of your solder pads have had all of the solder completely removed. Once you've got your component in place, add a little bit of flux to all of the points. Usually you would use a paintbrush. Here I'm going caveman style and just using my pry tool. The reason it's very important to get the component flush to the board is basically to create stability. The thumbstick's going to be pushed and pulled, and we don't want it moving around or stressing on these solder joints. This was not the most beautiful of soldering jobs, in my opinion. Good solder joints should look more like a tent than a balloon. And so if you notice your solders don't look ideal, it's usually a good idea to go back around and just correct them. Here I'm trying to remove a little bit of extra solder by dabbing a clean solder tip and just removing a tiny little bit, or in some cases adding a little bit. I can see I wasn't satisfied with these 2 points here, so I just completely redid them. I mean, if you're going to go to all this work, you may as well try to do it the best you possibly can. Inspecting my work, doesn't look perfect, but it's serviceable and it'll do. Now to reassemble, the 2 screws are needed to reattach the motherboard and the daughter board back together. Replace the rumble motors in their little sockets. Can insert the internals into the bottom part of the case. Replace the thumbstick covers. Put the top back on. At this point, we're ready to test and see if it works. And back in Elder Scrolls, and as you can see, the drift is gone. I actually did this repair several weeks before posting the video, and I've been using the controller the whole time and I've still got no problems. The drift is completely gone. And then all that's left to do at that point is the final parts of the reassembly. Just replace the 5 screws that you removed. And clip back on the 2 covers, and you're basically back to perfect. And that's it for this video. One Xbox One controller with stick drift, good as new. I hope you enjoyed the video, or maybe that it helped you out a bit. For everyone who made it to the end of the video, thanks very much for your views and support. Always remember your happy thought, and I'll see you next time.